and hopefully everybody can see the agenda on your screen. So just to give you an overview of what we will be discussing today, we will be giving you a general overview of reports in the redesign, and then looking in depth at the report manager and what you can do in the report manager. And we will learn how to create a custom report from a template report, and that uses the custom report creator, so we will get some experience with that. And we will create a report from a grid, which I really think if you have not done before, you will definitely like that method of creating your own custom report from a grid. And then we have a few miscellaneous tips at the end, and of course your questions, which hopefully you will speak up and ask questions throughout the training today. You can also place comments in chat if you don't have audio the way you're connected, if you don't have a microphone. And with the agenda that we sent out today, we also sent you a handout that gives you a general overview of reports in the redesign and the report manager and all of these options in the report manager that Mary's going to talk to you about, and then using the custom report creator that Jake and I will work with you a little bit more thoroughly on after Mary, gives you the basic overview of some report information. So we will be using a demo database today to show you these exercises, and feel free to just watch and ask questions, or if you want to run similar reports in your own database, feel free. And please stop us at any point if you have any questions. So I will go ahead and let Mary share her screen and get you guys started on the first part.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. The first thing, when you log in, you see your reports, your report links. If you have any reports marked as a favorite, which we'll talk about in a little bit later, then that will show up first. Otherwise, you probably see this whole list, and most of the concepts that actually all of the concepts I'm going to talk about work the exact same way between USPS and USAS. So I'm actually going to be in the USAS database, but if you're following along in USPS, um, the concepts I am talking about and how they function works the same way between both. We're going to go to the reports menu. And when you go to the reports menu, you see down here below the line are what are called canned reports. These are reports that SSTT has written because they require more programming and they can't be customizable other than maybe a few minor filters at the time that you run them, or query parameters as they're called. But you can't customize these reports because they are for a specific purpose. You have a few on accounting. Now, if you go to payroll, that list is quite large because many of the reports required for payroll require a lot more customization. So it is more difficult to have those as modifiable reports. And so the canned reports list is much greater on payroll than it is on accounting. Some are pre-formatted and used as submissions, such as the vendor new hire report in USAS, or the new employee new hire report, or ODJFS in USPS. The other options we have are report bundles, and the report bundles can be generated to create a group of reports at one time. SSTT has standard report bundles so that when you close the month, it kicks off a certain set of reports. When you close the calendar year or the fiscal year, it kicks off a certain set of reports. You can also create report bundles. So if you want to, that is one of the options that we have available to replace the FISC reports in Bear from Classic. You could create report bundles that would run on a nightly basis and then put them into the Bear directory structure and set people up to see the reports that way. That is one option that you could do with report bundles. The third option here is custom report creator. And we will be discussing that later. I believe Jake is going to be talking about the custom report creator and how you can create a report completely from scratch. The majority of our time is going to be spent on the reports manager. And this is where you can access all of the reports, either written by SSDT or reports that you have customized, created, saved from a grid, or have imported because you have received the file from someone else, or received those reports from saved those reports and imported them from the reports library. The SSDT reports are considered templates. They are very customizable and they're different from the canned reports on the menu. You can also import, as I said, import reports. So if you go to the help and the about, or the public USAS reports library, you can click on this link and it will take you to the public reports library. This is where people from across the state have written reports that they felt were beneficial, that were not part of SSDT's reports that they had provided. So you can go out here, and if you find a report that you think that you would like, then you can click on this link here and see what the report would look like. And okay, well, I like that report. And that's the classic mistake that I always do. I hit the close instead of the back button there. And then you can click on the report's name and it'll come up and it'll say, oh, you can't preview that. You have to download this. So then you click the download and you see here, it has downloaded that report. So now I'm going to go back to my reports manager. And I'm going to go to import. In Chrome, by default, unless you have your Chrome set differently, all of your downloads go into your download folder. And so I'm in my download folder. I selected that first report there because that's the report definition I just downloaded. I click open, and now I can customize the name. I can change the description, or I could add tags. Tags are a way to group reports together in searching. So you can filter on tags to pull up all of the reports that you want to run for your board on a monthly basis. You can put board or month or something like that for a tag, and then you can filter on that tag. So I'm just going to put, let's see, just put a tag of test so I can show that to you. And so you see here, I have the report that I just created, and you can see the tag here that I put on it. Um, and then if I have that report now that I can generate that report whenever I want to generate it. The public reports library is separated into different sections. It has the accounts-based reports, it has budgeting reports, and so you can just go down through and you can take a look. If there are any reports that you would like, then feel free to look at the example and then download that report definition and import it into your reports manager. When you import a report, it is only viewable to you or anyone in your district that has the same access level that you do. The other button here at the top is create form. And this is where if you would want to create a customizable form, we did that to import direct deposit notices for each of our districts. And we use the create forms to do that. The next thing we're going to do is go through each one of the buttons here on the grid, and these are the same options. They all work the same, whether you're in payroll or in accounting. Um, each of the icons that I'm going to talk about work the exact same way. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get to a report that will have a little more of some of the options that I want to show. The first button is generate report. Generate and download a report. So when you click on that, it pulls up the generate report screen. You can change the format of the report. We have multiple formats. Most of the reports are defaulted to PDF, but you can do them in just about any format that you want. I will tell you, if you choose the Excel format, that is really not the option you want. That basically puts the report on an Excel spreadsheet. It's not manipulatable at all. You can't do anything with it. It just, instead of putting the report on PDF, it puts it in Excel with all of the headers and everything. Most of the time, when you want to put data in Excel, you will want the Excel data. But there is one additional format, Excel field names, that when you want to do something where you're going to be importing the data back, this is similar to Safari ODBC, but one difference on this is when you do this in Excel field names, when you import the data back in to Redesign, you don't have to change your field names. All of the headers are exactly what they need to be. Um, what we found with Safari ODBC with Classic was sometimes the headers were not what they needed to be when you went to import data back. So then you would have to change your header information before you could import your file. But if you use Excel field names, then when you go to import, then that will be exactly what you need. Um, you can use this to say change deduction rates, change pay groups or buildings. You can use this to create some of your budget spreadsheets for next year's proposed. Um, and we've already talked about last week how you can do your budgeting scenarios. But that's some of the ways that the different report options, the Excel field names could be used, and the different options you have here on format. The next is page size, and our options include letter, legal, half letter, note, or ledger. The most common are letter or legal. Orientation, you have landscape or portrait. And then your report name, and you can change this if you choose. It's the title that appears at the top of the report. Summary report, if you check mark that, it only includes properties designated as control breaks or control headers and the related totals and subtotals. This is similar to Classic. On some of the reports, they had a brief or expanded option. If you did the brief option, that's what the summary report option here would be similar to. And then the show report options will show all of the options that you use to create this particular report. Also, if you think the screen isn't quite big enough for you to see, you can hit the plus sign here, and it will expand your screen to the full screen. If you want to back down to the way it was, then you just hit the minus there, and it will condense it back. The next are query options or parameters. If nothing is entered on this screen, the report is run wide open, which will affect runtime and include all appropriate data for all available date range for whatever report that you're running. So we do recommend that on at least most of the reports, you do some kind of query parameters, such as the one that I am working on here is purchase order detail. Let's do true, and that would get all of your purchase orders that are invoiceable or are considered open. The date shortcuts, we've talked about those several times in our trainings, but you can put in the start and end date, or if you want for the fiscal year, you can put an F for the start and an L for the end. If you want just for the open period, you can put P and D. If you want for the current month, M and H. Any of the date shortcuts, you can put those in instead of actually typing in 07/01/2020 to 06/30/2021. You can do the F and the L, and it automatically polls for those specific dates. On fields that ask for wildcards, you can put in a percent sign, and that is your wildcard. For fields that, if you do a percent sign, you cannot do a comma to say do 2%/3 or comma 3% to get your 200 and your 300 funds on the same report. But there are other fields that you could do commas. If it doesn't ask for a wildcard, usually you can do a comma in that field. Um, when it asks for the full account code, you do have to put in your hyphens. So you would do a 1 hyphen 25 10 hyphen 512 and just put in your whole if there's an area that you want to skip, you could do 2 hyphens and continue on with your account code. The Save Recall button. This drop down up here is when the very first time that you run the report, it will be set to your default parameters. Um, you can set, um, you can run it as most recent, which is what it was the last time that you ran the report, or you can set parameters and then you can save those parameters and then recall them. To set a new set of parameters, um, I'm going to say I want to do this just for the student activities, then click on the drop down and select the blank header and um, title it whatever you want. And once you tab off of that field, you will see that your save sign, it looks like a disk cartridge, is now visible. So then you can save that. And now that is one of your saved query parameters so that the next time you go to this report, you can select that option and it will always be set for the options that you chose. So I selected test PO detail and it changed my parameters. Now I can go back to student activities open PO and you see it has the parameters that I just set. The save recall is only for an individual user. So if you are writing this report for others to see, then you may want to share that report with other people rather than have it as safe parameters and create it as a new report. Or you can just keep it as the safe parameters and then you will be able to run that report for yourself whenever you need it. This chain link here, this is called a report link. And this is available for any of the parameters saved in Save Recall. It displays a hyperlink that can be bookmarked, copied and emailed to another user within your district, placed on a web page, or used in Excel to refresh data similar to Safari. And we'll cover that in our advanced reports training. If you say include parameters, then it will always run based on exactly the information that you ran at this time. But if you don't say include parameters and you run this report from the link at a later time, then it will pull the current information. Um, and when you do click on this link, the user will be prompted to log in using their USSR credentials. One of the things I forgot to mention is when you hover over any of these options, it gives you a a description of what the option is. This option is generate and download reports. The next option is open report definition in detail view. I'm going to go back because there's a few more options in the generate reports that I um, haven't gone over yet. And of course, I chose a different report, and so it is taking a little bit longer to come up than the report that I had um, wanted. And as I said, the same report icon options are the same in payroll as they are in accounting. So you see when you go to the reports grid in payroll, the look is the same as in accounting. And since this wasn't the report that I wanted, it will get out of there and hopefully this one will come up quicker. The last option, we talked about the query options. The last option is the sort options. Um, this should limit the number of custom reports that you may need to create because they now allow you to be able to change your sorts with each time you run the report. These options will save in the most recent and your save recall options, like info on the other tabs. The sortable properties are any of the properties that you can add to sort from. The selected properties are the properties showing in this section will determine the sort order in which the report will be sorted. What you see here is what was predefined in the when the report was initially written. The property listed highest in the list will determine the first sort priority. To select sort priorities, you can click and drag items from here, and wherever you drop it is where it will go. Now I can't change this. If I wanted fund to be sorted first, I can't change that. So I would have to drop it back over. And then if I wanted fund to be sorted first, then I would have to drop it above PO number, and then now fund would be sorted first. You can check multiple items by holding down your shift and or control, and then drag and add multiple items at one time to your sort list. Check marking a control break will create a header for that property and add subtotals for the property if set up with the formula to sum. And some of this will be discussed more when Carrie gets into the customization. So when you have your report the way you want it, you can click on Generate Report to generate the report, or you can click on the schedule here, and the schedule will bring up you can put in a job name, a chronic expression, which we have talked about a little bit, and we'll talk about more probably in the advanced training, and then an email address to send the email to. And then you can have this job run a one time and send it to someone, or on a daily basis or a weekly basis or um, a monthly basis. And depending on what the cron expression is that you use there. And we'll talk about those options more in advanced reports training. So that is generating a report, the download report definition. Um, the next option is the eyeball. This opens an existing report so that you can see all of the details of the setup. You can then modify it by changing these parameters and saving it as a new report name. Um, so Carrie will get into more detail using this when she does her part. So I'm just going to go back to my reports manager and go through the rest of my icons. The edit button, I'm going to show you a couple of these here because they change depending on where the report was generated. If it was initiated because you or someone in your district created it, then you have the option to change the report name and the description and also add tags. If it is an SSDT canned report, the only thing you can do is add tags to that report. You can't change the name or the definition of it. Tags may be helpful to categorize reports. As I said, you can tag reports as monthly, year end, board. You can add as many tags as you want, just separate them by commas, and then use the wildcard, the percent, as a wildcard when querying the grid. One caution, tags are not user specific. They can be seen and modified by all users with report access. So if you put tags on reports, someone else could either add tags or even remove your tags. So that's something to be aware of about tags. The next is the X for delete. And as you can see here, the only report definitions that I can delete are those that was created by myself or someone else in the district, but I do not have the delete option for any of the SSDT canned reports. For districts that have not started their parallel yet, if you create any report definitions that you would like to um, keep and would like to be able to use once you start your parallel, then you would use this download report definition to save what's called a JSON file. The download report definition downloads this, and it doesn't have any options for you at all. It just automatically downloads it and saves it so that when you are in your parallel database, you can go to import report as I showed previously when I imported the report I downloaded from the reports library. And you see my report definition here, and then I can import that report into my database. So now I have the report that I painstakingly took time to customize and I didn't want to lose. And now I have that report that I can use once I'm in my parallel and ready to start working. You can also send this JSON file to other users in your own district, or you can send it to people in other districts. Hey, I wrote this report. This is really great. Or asking one of your colleagues, hey, do you have a report that will do this? Yes, I wrote this report. Let me send you the definition. Well, this is how you can share report definitions with each other and then import those definitions and customize those reports to meet your needs. If I have written a report and I want to be able to share it with other people, then I can click on this share reports, and I can select what roles I want to share this with. Well, I want to share it with anyone that has USAS Manager or USAS Standard. And I click that and I hit save. And now anyone that logs in and has either of those two accesses will see my Mary Cache Summary as one of their reports now in their available reports. The last option here is to select favorites. And any report that you click on as a favorite, when you log in and you are on your home screen, that is what will show up here. To see all of the reports on your home screen, then you just click on the show all reports. But by default, once you have any report marked as a favorite, then that is all that you would see here. If this is how you want your building people or your activity advisors to run their reports, then teach them how to select their reports as favorites. So then when they log in, all they will see are their favorites, and they can hit the generate report button and be able to generate the report. Are there any questions about anything that I have talked about thus far? Okay, I am going to stop sharing my screen and turn everything over to Carrie.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Okay, so I am logged into that same test database that Mary was just in, and I'm going to go into my report manager. And so she explained a lot of the items in here, and I am going to explain the eyeball option that she referenced, which is how we are going to open one of these template report definitions and customize it further. So I'm probably going to find the SSDT cache summary report from my report manager grid. You can scroll down. These are, I believe, in alphabetical order. And if not, if you don't like to scroll and find that, you can also start to filter at the top of this report manager grid, just like in any other grid. And I'm going to start here with the SSDT cache summary and click this view eyeball button to view my report details. And then We are going to customize this cash summary report a little bit. So first, at the top left, you see the object that this report is pulling information from. So since we clicked on a template report, a lot of the information is selected for us. Whereas in a little bit, Jake's going to show you how to create one of these from scratch. But this cash account, of course, is where our information for the cash summary report is coming from. If you click this drop down, you can see a lot of other objects that are available to pull information from. If you were to select another object from this list, it's going to clear everything that's pre-selected from your screen because everything that's selected is currently related to my cash account object. But these different objects are kind of like the views in Safari. Where do you want to pull the information from? So it's kind of your starting point. But it's nice since we are working with a template report that that's already defined for us. And then as I come down here to the left, I see all of the properties that are available to be selected and added to this report. And then in the middle of my screen, I see the properties that have been selected and are being pulled into my report as columns and how those columns are appearing. So before I customize anything on this cash summary, I'm just going to click my Generate Report tab and scroll down and click Generate Report so that everybody can see what my cash summary report looks like to start with. And like Mary said, if I would have filled in some query parameters, it would filter down my information and just run for those specific accounts. I ran this wide open since I'm in a test database, just so we get some data on here, so you can get a good feel for this. But here is my cash summary report from SSDT's template before I make any customization or changes to this. So you can see the columns that are appearing here, and really I don't have any subtotals throughout the report. I don't have any control breaks. We'll add some of those so you can see what those actually are. I do have grand totals at the bottom. So let's go ahead and customize this report a little bit so you can see what is available to be customized. So if you followed along, I'm just going to go back and click back on the Select Properties tab, which is where we were when I came in here with the eyeball from the Report Manager. And we're going to start customizing some of this information. So if we wanted to add additional columns to our report, then we have a big long list of available properties on the left. I mean, by default on a template report, SSDT has done a pretty good job of giving you a good amount of information and replicating those reports from Classic, but maybe there's something else you would like to see. So maybe we want to see which of these accounts are active and which are inactive. So you can double click on an item on the left and it will add it to the bottom of the list, or you could drag and drop and place it, wherever you want in the list. So if you select a property that you do not want, there's this X over here to the right, so you can then remove it. If I drag and drop it, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'd rather have that at the bottom of my list, which would be the furthest right column on my report, then I can just drag that to another location in this list. But so you can select any property from the left and put it here in the middle in the selected properties area, and then that will become a column on your report. Over here on the left, you see also these little arrows that you can expand to get to even more properties. So like if I come down here and expand fund, I can get to the fund code or the fund description. I can get to even more properties by expanding these different properties. So all of the properties are kind of like in a hierarchy. If you expand, you see what's below that and pertaining to that specific area. So we'll play around with that a little bit more as we go through this demo. So the list of properties that I currently have selected, they are currently listed from top to bottom, and that's going to correspond to my columns that appear in my report from left to right. So if I wanted to reorder these, I would just drag up and down, and that would rearrange the columns on my report. You also saw if I hovered over any of these items, it displays a little bit more information for me. So maybe I can figure out where this item came from on the left, or just a little bit more detail about this. If I hover, I have that tooltip just like Mary showed us we have it elsewhere in the software. Let's go ahead and just run this report again if I click the Generate tab, so you can see that we added that active column, and make sure that that makes sense. I think that probably makes sense to everybody, but you can see this pop up here and see the new column that we added to our report. So over here on the right, since that active option, since we added it to the very bottom of our list, it's going to be all the way over here to the right. And it appears as a checkbox if the account is active, and it is unchecked if the account is inactive. So then back to my select properties. Again, if I didn't like that, I could just click the X to remove that. And then I would be back to where I started. So the next thing after you have all of these properties selected and in the order that you want them to display, you have a sort priority, and that is how the report is going to be sorted. So the data within the report, how do you want that to be sorted? If you see a 0, that means there's no sort. So right now it's not sorting based on description or initial cash amount or any of these other options. Right now it's sorting first by full account code. So you can have a primary sort and a secondary sort. You can have sorts even set as the same number for certain reasons. You may want to do that. But let's go ahead and change this sort. Maybe we want to sort first by fund and then second by account code. The next column, you have your sort order, whether you want that to be ascending or descending. So those are just the two options. If you have a sort priority of greater than 0, then you have that sort order option that you can change if desired. Then the next column is a control break, which you saw in a couple of the other screens that Mary showed you. But the control break is only available on a property that is sorted. So a sort priority of 1 or greater, you have the option to check the box to control break. So let's go ahead and control break on fund, which will add a bold heading whenever the fund changes. So it's going to make our report kind of stand out a little bit better for us. And it's going to add these functions in the next column whenever the fund changes. So a control break adds kind of like a bolded header. And also if you have any functions set on your report, it's going to add that subtotal per control break. So right now we only saw all of these subtotals at the very bottom, grand totals of our report. But now we're saying we want to see a bold header when we change fund, and we want to see all of these different subtotals, all of our sum functions per fund by doing this. So let's go ahead and click the Generate Report tab and generate this again so you can see what changed. I am going to be generating the report a lot, just so you can kind of see. So hopefully it makes sense. Sometimes people learn better by seeing. So I am going to bounce back and forth with that a little. So now you see this bolded header on my report for fund, and if I scroll down, I see subtotals within my report per fund. So back in my database, if I go back to the Select Properties tab, again, the function, you have 4 options there. You have sum, average, minimum, or maximum. Those are available on any property that is numerical, and it's going to provide that function at the desired control break. The next option over here is called extended properties. So that gives you the option to modify a lot of these items that we've just changed: sort priority, sort order, control break, and function. And it gives you a little bit further customization. So if I click extended properties next to fund, I see here's my sort priority of 1 that I selected on the prior page and the sort order of ascending. I see the control break that I check marked, and I see some additional options available to me. So I can suppress this column from the report or not. So right now, fund is suppressed, meaning the fund was not a separate column on my report. So when we added active as a separate column, it was over there on the right-hand side of the report and showing the active checkbox on every single line of data. Right now, we only saw fund. If I hop back here, right now we only saw fund listed in these little control break headers. We don't see a column that shows, fund 006 on this line and fund 018 on these 3 lines. So fund is suppressed right now so that it's not also a column on the report. So you can suppress a column or unsuppress a column depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Suppress repeating would be like if I unsuppress fund so that it's going to be listed as a column on my report, and then I suppress repeating. Let me save this. This one might be easier for you to just see. Now I'm going to see fund as a column on my report, but instead of seeing like 001 on that entire first page on every line of data, I'm just going to see 001 on the first line, and then it's going to suppress every time that it repeats. So I see fund 001 up here. If I had not suppressed repeating, I would have saw that repeated many, many times down this right-hand column, but suppress repeating is only showing it on the very first instance that it comes to it. And then it's hiding the consecutive times. If hopefully that makes sense. So back to my select properties, my extended properties button next to fund is where I changed that. So if I change that back to be suppressed and not suppress repeating, then page break, we have not discussed that. We did not see that as a previous option. It's similar to the control break, but it's going to start each of those on its own page. So if you just want a general fund, until it's finished with its pages, and then start like food service on its own page. So that's what the page break is going to do. The function, again, is only available on numerical properties. So we saw that on the prior screen as well. The alignment, how you want the information in that column to appear, either left justified, right justified, in the center. So you can, clean up a report and make it look a little better by changing the alignment sometimes. You have the option to change a column title. So let me cancel out of fund. Maybe it would make sense to come up here on this full account code and click the extended properties and change this column title to Fund SCC. And click Save. If I go generate this report, you can see that I have now changed a column title on my report that previously said full account code to show fund/SCC instead, because that's going to mean a little bit more to me. It's going to make a little bit more sense to me as I look at this report. Because that full account code is really the full like cash account code. So when I see full account code, I think of, the whole fund, function, object, special cost, the whole string of numbers. But so you can rename a column header from that extended properties option. If I go back to select properties, you can also customize some of those control breaks. So those added control headers, and you could also add control footers or detail headers. So a control header, if you have a control break right now, which our control break is on fund, maybe you want the fund description to appear right next to that. And so you want to add fund description as a property and then make it be in the control header only. Or maybe you want that to be in the control footer only.
Carrie, there's a question. How did you change that name again?
Okay, I will go back and show you that. Let's see. So that was, let me back out of here. In my select properties grid, if I can call this a grid, or my select properties area, click the extended properties button, and then this column title line right down here, this field. So the control header and control footer, if I go back and view one of these reports, this is like my control header. So if I wanted to add something else to this control header, for instance, like fund description, if I wanted this to say Fund 001 General Fund, I could add fund description from over here on the left. If I go expand fund and find fund description and add it to my report, and then click the extended properties next to that fund description and say control header only. I don't want this to be a column on my report. The only reason I'm adding this is to get it in that control header to be more descriptive. And then I'll generate that report so you can see that. And, oh, I did forget one step. So that did not work. So why did that not work? With a control header or control footer or the detail header, I need to have that property with the same sort as what I want it to appear next to. So I need my fund description to be at the same sort priority as my fund in order for that to actually work. So that was the step that I missed. So I apologize for that. So remember, I did say sometimes you would want sort priorities to be the same. And so it's because I'm trying to get this fund description to appear right there with my fund in that control break header. So let's give this a try again and see if we have succeeded this time. So now we see funds with description instead of just fund alone without a description. So just like that was the control header only, there is a control footer only, which we're not using right now, but here by these subtotals, you could also put some information down there to describe those subtotals if you wanted. That's what the control footer is for. The detail header only would be like a subheader. So, maybe you're working with like a vendor report and you want the vendor number and the vendor name to appear in the control break header. And then maybe you want the detail header to show like the vendor address or something. So a detail header, if I go back to the select properties, it would be this option if you wanted that to be like a secondary line under that little control break heading. So these three, I know these are probably harder to understand what they're doing and you're probably going to use them less often. But this next option, width, maybe you'll use it more often. So maybe on that full account code where we changed the name from full account code to fund SCC, maybe the width of that, maybe we can shrink that a little because we don't need it to be as wide now that we changed that column header. And I'm also just going to remove this fund description that we added here and then generate the report because I think this will be a little cleaner to look at. And so we've shrunk that fund SCC just a little. So it's kind of a guessing game when you're playing with the column width. It starts I think when we edited that one, like it just showed 0. If it's not a predefined width that you have entered, then the software is just going to try to adjust itself to the best fit. But if you're trying to shrink a certain column so that you can widen other columns, you might have to play around with these numbers a little bit. I normally start with like an 8 for a skinnier column and more like a 20 or a 25 for a wider column, and then adjust it slightly from there until you're at the width that helps you fit what it is that you're trying to fit into a certain column. You can kind of limit the amount of text wrapping by widening certain columns and shrinking others. So like by us shrinking the width of the fund SCC column, our description is, a little bit more optimized so it's wrapping that text a little less frequently. So if I minimize this and go back here into my report creator where we're customizing that template report, I'm back on the select properties tab. So any questions right now about what we've seen here about selecting properties from the left and adding them as columns on our report, changing the sort of the report or the sort order, adding little control break headers and subtotals, and then in the extended properties, I think the thing that you're going to use the most is probably the column title or maybe the column width. Or you might come in here and suppress a column if you want to have it on your report for a sort reason, but you don't want it to appear as a column on your report. So you might find yourself check marking suppress once in a while too.
No more questions.
So once you have your, report customized, just a reminder, up here at the top, there's a save as option where you can save your customized report at any given time by entering a name and clicking save report. And then it's available for me to access later in the report manager. So the next tab here in the custom report creator is the configure filters tab. So when Mary was showing you the query parameters tab, the query options tab when generating a report, this is allowing you to do the same thing. It's allowing you to filter your report from this, report creator area instead of on that query options tab. So you can definitely still use the query options tab. Sometimes I feel it's a little bit more user friendly, but the part of this that I like here is that these operations, you can change them. So like where Mary was saying, if the field allows you to use a wildcard and then it doesn't let you use a comma, or if you can use a comma, you can't use a wildcard. That's all driven based on these operations that are used. So if you're trying to do something else that it won't let you do in those query options, a lot of times you can come here and accomplish what you are trying to accomplish. So the query parameters that I'm talking about that Mary talked about, if I go back to the generate report tab and click this query options tab, which looks like what Mary was showing us, this is what I'm talking about. So these are going to pop up for you as you're generating the report. And here on the configure filters tab, this is what is controlling what is available for you. So over here on the right, I have filter values that start with the word parameter. So these are a parameter that the user can type in on the fly as they're running the report. So right now I have a parameter for my full account code, which says fund SCC because it's the full cash account code. And for example, 006-0000. And then I have a parameter for my fund, and that parameter box is saying fund code, use % for wildcard. If I come back here to that generate report tab and click my query options, that's exactly what I see here. Fund SCC, the example, and then fund code, use % for wildcard. So this configure filters tab is controlling those boxes that are available for you to type in to filter your report when you're running. So in our advanced class, we will actually teach you how to write these parameters. But today I'm just going to show you some changes that you can actually make directly here so that if you were on the generate report tab or generating your report from the report manager and you needed to do something slightly different, I'm going to show you how you can come here to make some changes. So if we were here in our cash summary report and we wanted to work directly in here to filter that cash summary report, we right now see like fund, like, and then it's a parameter. Let's just change this to fund equals 006 and go back to my generate report tab and generate my report. And so what this is going to do is instead of now allowing you to type in a fund when you're running the report, this is just saying every time I run this report, this is going to be my food service cash summary. And it's filtered in there. So if you liked that, you could go ahead and save this as your food service cash summary and have that available in the grid. And you can run it on at any time, or you could share it with any user who needs to see that report. If I go back to this configure filters tab, maybe instead of just one specific fund, I want to be able to enter a couple different funds. So the one of operation will allow you to enter multiples separated by commas. So maybe I want to see like my student activity, and principals accounts in a report. So I can go ahead and generate that report. And if I liked this, then I could save this as like my student activity cash summary. Or even if you're not working here from the configure filters tab to save reports, sometimes it's just like if you were out there in the query options and you wanted to be able to enter multiples separated by commas instead of a wildcard, you could come here and say, okay, I remember I can say one of, and then enter multiples. So sometimes this just helps you be able to filter the way that you're trying to if you can't accomplish it from the Query Options tab. Also here on this list, you have not equals, which would be the opposite of equals. So if you want everything other than food service, you'd be not equals 006. You also have, if I scroll down, not one of. If you want to be able to exclude multiples, you can do not one of, and then a string of numbers separated by commas. If you want to do like a range of funds, you can select between, and then let's say we want to do like our state and federal grants. You can do between 400 and 599. So I'm going to separate those two numbers with a comma to see a range of numbers. At the same time, maybe I want to limit my special cost center to just a specific set of special cost numbers to define my year. And so, of course, you could do like my special cost center equals, let me just clear this out, 9021. Or maybe your district uses 9021 and 9121 and 9221 to all correspond to my fiscal year. You can do the equals or the one of to accomplish those different items. A different one that we could look at contains. And I am in a demo database, so I'm going to go back to like FY19 and see a special cost center that contains a 19, or you could do like contains a 21 for your numbers containing a 21. And then let's just generate this so you can see that. And then I'm just seeing those funds that I limited it to, my 400 through 599 for a special cost center containing a 19. So before I hop back to my Configure Filters tab, if I click here at the Query Options tab, as I am removing that parameter terminology from those fields and I'm hard coding in a fund and a special cost center, you no longer see those here as query parameters. My query parameter list is getting shorter because back on my Configure Filters, I've removed this terminology that makes that box be available for me. But, I'm not modifying the SSDT version of the report. I'm either just in here running this on the fly, or I'm going to save it as my own version of the report. So it's not like you're permanently changing SSDT's report. You're just customizing this to accomplish what it is that you set out to accomplish this time. So a couple other operations that are available to us. Let's go ahead and look at if I first add an additional filter from over here at the left. If I expand date range and add stop date, which I can do by dragging and dropping or by double clicking. So just like when we selected properties to appear as columns on our report, I can select additional properties to filter on. So I can say, I want to see stop date is not null. So stop date is not blank, or stop date is null. Stop date is blank. So the is null and not null, that might help as you're trying to clean up some of your data. So let's do stop date is null and generate a report. And this would actually show me all of those FY19 grants that I don't have stop dates on. So people could actually use these accounts at this point in time. So that actually might be something that you want to look at and possibly clean up. Back on the Configure Filters tab, Let's go back up here to fund and see what options for operations we have not talked about. We have not talked about like. So like, basically, I think of that as begins with or starts with. So I want to see a fund that starts with a 5. So any of my 500 funds. We haven't talked about the greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to. So let's do less than or equal to 90/20. So any federal fund of, from FY20 or earlier, and generate the report. And this still had that stop date is null in there because I didn't remove that filter. So these are all of my prior year federal funds that don't have stop dates. So again, you could be coming in here to maybe skip the select properties tab. Maybe you're happy with the columns as they are on the report and the sort is fine and the subtotals are fine. And maybe you're just coming in here to be able to configure some filters with different operations. So if so, then you continue on to that generate report tab and generate the report. And if you decide this is something you want to be able to use going forward or to share with another user, just remember that you can save that up here as a new report name, then go find that report in the report manager and share it with a different role of users in your district, or download it and send it to another user. On this configure filters tab, one thing that we have not mentioned, so with the remove option, if I added something that I no longer want, I can click that X to remove it, and then it's no longer in my filter options. This arrow over here to the right, this is the expert query, which if I click this, it looks like a lot of programmer code that tells me the same information that I saw here. And this is helpful, like if we're troubleshooting a report and needing to send information off to SSDT, we can copy this information and send it to them. Or sometimes we can accomplish more here in this expert query than we can, if I minimize this, than we can here with the normal configure filter options. So in our advanced class, we will actually look at an option where we expand this expert query and do a more like a more intricate filter, where instead of just being able to filter on an individual property, we want to see if there's anything that matches multiple properties. So that expert query, you will not use that very option, but we will show you an example of that in the advanced class that you actually might like. Down here at the bottom, the load saved query. Right now, you don't see any option down here. I don't have any saved queries that I can load. So we can actually go look at one so I can show you what that would do. Or you also can save your query here. So if you like your query parameters that this is like my prior year federal funds, you can save that. And it's not saving the report, it's saving this filter. So if you like this filter and would like to be able to use it on other reports, or you would like to be able to use it in different grids, you can save that by entering a name and clicking save. Then in the reports that would allow that filter based on the object, or in the grids that allow that, you would be able to access that. And where you would be able to access that in the grid is in the advanced query. And if we also go look at the advanced query, if we save an advanced query, we will be able to access it here in a report. So if I go to maybe core vendors, I'll show you an advanced query. and we'll save one, and then we'll go into a report where you can access that saved query so you can see what I mean. So if I go to my advanced query button here at the top right of the grid, you see all of my available properties on the left, and I don't have any selected yet in the middle. Maybe we'll just do one on active vendors. So we'll do active equals T for true. Down here at the bottom, you can see my grid results right now include both active and inactive. My active column says true and false for my results. When I click apply query up here, that's going to change. So my results now say all of my vendors that are appearing are active. So if I like that query, I can save it by giving it a name and clicking save query. Then the next time I come to the vendor grid, I can, here I have a different one. I can, let's say, clear, hide advanced query. The next time I go into advanced query, instead of having to select stuff from the left and select my operation, I can just hit active vendors. There it is, click apply. So I know the active vendor one, might be a little simple, but I still hope that lets you see what you can accomplish. Then if we were to go into the report manager and pick a vendor report. So down here at the bottom, we will click our eyeball next to our vendor listing and go into the configure filters tab. And you see some stuff that's defined here already. If I instead load my saved query, this is going to change. So if there's always something that you're looking for and you want to see it in a grid or in a report, those two kind of work hand in hand. So we just wanted to, hopefully that explains like what that option at the bottom in this configure filters option is for. Okay, so we are back in the report manager in the eyeball of a report. And this tab, the generate report tab, this looks familiar. This is what Mary talked about previously. It's just accessing it a different way. We have those report options displaying here for the different formats that Mary explained, the page size, orientation, the name. So the name, if we run this we had our active vendor filter applied. This is going to be our active vendor listing. The summary report or the show report options. I actually picked a report that doesn't have any query options, the one that I'm in right now. But that query options takes you to that same area where we've seen where it's letting you filter your report, and then the sort options tab that Mary explained. So if you want to see this report name, if I generate this, you will now see that at the top of my report, for my active vendors, I see a title on the first page of that report called active vendor listing instead of vendor listing. So these options on the generate report tab, Mary explained when you were just clicking the generate option from the report manager. If somebody sends you a report, somebody downloads that report definition like Mary talked about, you can import it directly into here and start customizing it. This button over here at the right, this will return you to the report manager. Just remember whenever you leave this area, you will lose anything if you have customized the columns that are appearing on your report or the filters. So you want to remember to save it if you want to keep it. And I guess one other thing to point out, this is kind of like working with Safari. You're selecting your properties that you want to appear in your spreadsheet or your report, and then you're configuring the filters. Okay, so now after I've selected the properties that I want to appear, what data do I want to see? And then the generate report would be like, okay, save my Safari. Well, the nice thing is you saw me generate that report over and over again when we were customizing the cash summary report, and I didn't have to save it every time, and I didn't have to go in and try to edit my Safari and really, you know, in a way that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. So in a really like uncertain way. Um, so it's kind of nice that you can customize a little, generate the report, take a look at it, see if you like what you did, or go back and change a property, go back and change a column width, change a column header, configure a filter. It's kind of nice that you can just keep working on this before you've gotten to your final point and saved if you want. But you just want to keep in mind, if you actually leave this screen and you haven't saved your changes yet, you will lose them. So, any questions? Okay, Jake is going to go through a payroll example and an accounting example that kind of reaffirms some of this information that we've just learned about. And he's also going to show you some additional tips and stuff, like starting from a grid instead of starting from a template report. So I can turn this over to Jake unless anybody needs a break before we do that. And I guess I'm not hearing anybody. So is everybody okay just continuing on?
No chatter in chat.
Alrighty then. So as Carrie said, most of our examples so far have been from the accounting side. So I'm going to start today in USPS. And so if you have checked the report manager and you want maybe a report to run and you can't find anything you're looking for, if you've tried the shared report library, didn't see anything that would help you there, and you just didn't want to go to your grid every single time you wanted to run a report or find some information and sort it and add columns or filter and spend that time. If you just wanted a quick report that you wanted to create and you could run on occasion when you would need it, you could be brave enough to go to the reports menu and go to the custom report creator to create your own report. Today I'm going to give you a very basic example because this can kind of be a little intimidating the first time you see it. So basically what you're looking at is a blank screen. So the report that I'm going to show you today is just a basic report that will display employees who are not marked as reportable to ODJFS. So just a kind of a simple employee type report. As Carrie mentioned, when editing a report, the first thing you kind of see at the top of the screen when creating a report is the object. So what I like to think about when I think about the object is, what screen am I going to see this information that I want to find on my report on? So I know because, kind of doing a little bit of looking ahead of time, that the ODJFS flags are going to be on the employee screen. So as I click my object drop down, just looking at all of the different options you can choose, you'll see that the properties will change depending on whatever object you choose. If you eventually want to run a report that has compensation information on it, the compensation object will give you a different set of properties to choose from than may be the employee object. So for this example, I'm just going to select the employee object because I know that's where my ODJFS flags are. So that gives me quite a extensive list of properties to choose from. The next thing you'll want to do when creating your own report would be to choose those properties, which Carrie mentioned will become the column headers on your report. Some of the properties will have an arrow, which will drop down and give you more options. So I'm just going to start adding some properties to my report. So if those of you following along, I'll try to kind of go a little bit slower so that you can follow along with me. So you can double click each property or you can drag it. Either one is an option, and that will kick that property over to the right, so you can start building your report. So I'm going to add a number, which I know is the employee like ID, and just kind of start building a report just based off of things I would want to see in the report when I run it. I want to add first name, last name. I want to maybe add the hire date or the ODJFS hire date. I want to add ODJFS reportable. That's what my report's going to be basically based around. Maybe I want to add some amounts to my report. So I'm going to add it maybe quarter to date gross. I might add year to date gross, just whatever you want to add to your grid. Maybe I want to add some positional information. If I click the drop down on positions, I might be able to add what job status. Maybe I want to see if these employees are active or not. Maybe I want to add position description, which might describe what this employee does. So I've kind of added a few properties from my list to my report. And like I said, these will become the column headings on your report as you build it. As Carrie mentioned before, you can maybe reorder how the columns are shown on the report by clicking the line, and you can drag it to a different spot. So say I want last name to go before first name, something like that. If I want to change anything on this report, change the columns or the order of the columns, you can do that way. If you see if you change your mind and decide, maybe I added a property by accident, or I just changed my mind, I don't want to, maybe I won't want to see that, you can click the X to remove that. So I removed the job status line because I don't really think I'm going to necessarily need that at this point. One important note is that the totals that I added, the quarter to date gross and the year to date gross, because they were added from the employee object, those totals are going to be totals that will include all positions that employee has. So you got to kind of think about where your properties are coming from, and because I added those from the employee object, those will include anything that has that is included for that employee. It's not necessarily position driven, it's more employee driven. So let's see. Since this report is just being used as an example, we kind of want to show how some of the basics work. We'll just accept this as being okay. We'll see where we are from here. So we'll be satisfied with the properties we've added in the order that they are. We'll see what we have. The next thing you can do is possibly create a sort. As Carrie was mentioning, since this is a custom report and it's not driven by an existing report, nothing is sorted. So say we want to sort by employee number or last name. I'm just going to sort this one by last name. So maybe I'll do a sort priority of 1. And if if it includes employees with the same last name, maybe I'll sort by first name as a second priority. If you wanted to add a control break, you could add that. As Carrie mentioned, you could have functions for total or numerical fields. So let's say at the end of our report, just to show you what would happen, I'll add sums to those to show you that how those kind of work. And then the expanded properties, which or the extended properties, which I'll come back to later. Carrie kind of covered to, if you wanted additional ways to modify your report as well. The next tab is the configure filters tab. Again, it's empty. So basically, if you were to generate this report, you're going to include, you're going to run it wide open. But say, because what I want out of this report is I want to see any employee who is not marked as reportable to ODJFS, I can select a property from the left, drag it over or double click it and start configuring a filter so that, we can kind of shrink down the number of items on this report. So what I want to do is filter on anyone whose ODJFS reportable field equals false. So I know that by looking at the employee screen earlier that the ODJFS reportable field is a checkbox, which is basically a true false field. So so I know if I want to create a filter that only shows those employees who are marked as or have the checkbox as unchecked, I can set this filter up as equals false, and that's what it'll give me on the report. There are a ton of options, as Carrie said, of ways you can filter your reports. We will really kind of expand on those more in advanced trainings and get more into detail on those. But I guess I could add another filter for maybe amounts. If I run this report, perhaps I have employees who haven't even been paid this year, or so maybe I just want to look at employees who have been. So I can go to my year-to-date gross field and say maybe I want to include employees who have an amount greater than 0. So because I've entered amounts in this filter value field, and I haven't written one of those complicated parameter style values that Carrie looked at earlier, when you go to generate this report, it's not going to give you any options. It's just going to run the report based on these fixed values that you've typed in your configure filters when you were building the report. So like I said, this is just a pretty basic report, so we'll just leave it at that. So I'm going to generate the report now and kind of see if we get what we expect to get. So I can click the generate report tab. If there's anything that I want to change on the style of how I want to run the report. I have added kind of, a handful of different column headings and properties. So maybe instead of a letter, or instead of a portrait orientation, maybe I do want to look at this in landscape. Maybe it'll fit everything on there a little better. So I'll change that. And, maybe I can look at the report and see what I get. So as I click generate report, I do see at the bottom, it just says employee report. So another thing we could do if we want to generate this again is maybe give it a name, and we'll look at that here in a second. Okay, so as I look at the report, I do see that it did not enter in names as I expected. But I do see that I did include employees who have their ODJFS reportable fields marked as unchecked. Also, I see that I have board members and students on my report as I expect also. So I think I'm going to go back and maybe look at modifying the report to maybe change the fields that I've added or the properties that I've added to try to make this, maybe look a little better or include the information that I would like. So, so as I go back to my USPS, I can go back to my selected properties and we'll maybe see what I did here. So I believe that when I selected my names, one thing I selected was from legal name. Sometimes the legal name doesn't look as doesn't work as well as we thought. And like I said, there's a ton of options in here. A lot of them will work, some of them won't. So sometimes you just have to kind of mix and match and see what will work best. I do see another option I have down here as name. So maybe I can get the names to pull in if I use that option. So what I'll do is I will remove my first and last name fields, pull over first and last name, maybe put those back into the order that I had those before. I always have trouble seeing the little line. There we go. Okay. Let's put last name first. Okay. So now I think using the name drop down instead of the legal name drop down, maybe that'll work better. I also noticed that when I ran the report earlier, that my position description was a little bit kind of scrunched and it was wrapping. So maybe I also want to make that column a little wider as well. So as Carrie mentioned before, I can go to my extended properties, and play with the column width a little bit. Remember that it uses something that you kind of have to play with. Some of those position descriptions had a bit longer of a description. So maybe I'll just start out and use like a 25 as my estimate. We'll see how that affects the report. So I'll save that. All right, and then as I go to generate the report, I also said maybe I could give this a name. So let's just say we'll call this ODJFS not reportable. And let's generate the report and see how that changes things. Okay. So the name showed up this time, so the name worked better than the legal name. I do see that it included the employees that I expected it to include. I also see that my quarter to date and year to date gross totals are at the bottom. So that's what happens when you choose the sum option for those properties. So, say this is a report that you want to run from time to time just to make sure that you have everyone's employee screens set up properly. Possibly there are employees that you forgot to mark the checkbox. You could run this and check, on occasion. It'll save you time from having to go to your employee screen and filter your grid or find the ODJFS reportable field and add it to your grid and sort. Maybe it's just, useful for you to just keep this report around, run it from time to time to make sure that that you have what you expect, on this report. If it's something you want to keep, you can go back to your report and say we could save this report to your report manager so that it's easy to find for the next time you want to use it. So so you give it a title, give it a name, save your report, and go to your report manager. Keep in mind that if you do not save your report and you click off of the custom report creator and you go to, look something up, or you will lose all of the changes that you have. There isn't going to be anything that warns you, to save before you leave the screen. So make sure you give your report a name, save it, and then you should get a little box at the top when you save that your report has been saved. And then you can go to your report manager and find that report there. So if you create a report that you want to share, you can do so from the report manager here, or do with what you need. So my report was saved right here, and I can generate that from the report manager. So creating a report from the custom report creator. Does anyone have any questions on anything that I did there? Okay, I know that was a very basic example. We will get into a lot more detailed stuff in an advanced training, but I thought for this basic reports training, giving you a basic example would be at least give you a good idea of what you could do creating your own report. I'm going to jump over to, I'm going to log out here. I'm going to jump over to US or USAS to give you another another way of kind of creating a custom report. Whoops. Okay, so one of the options I told you about when I first began was looking at grids to kind of sort and filter information. So I'm going to show you how to create and modify a report from a grid. just to kind of give you an idea of all the things you can do there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to transaction requisitions. And this might be easier instead of starting from scratch. Maybe you have an idea of what you want to see. And I'll show you what happens when you create a report from a grid here. So, that way you don't have to come up with the object or select all of the properties or create filters. You can kind of do that just by working in the grid, and then, create a report. And then if you need to make other modifications or more basic changes to your report, you can do that from that. So what I'm going to do is just looking at my requisitions grid, I'm going to filter that and try to create a report for any open or outstanding requisitions. So what I want to do is just look at any requisitions that have not been converted to POs yet. So what I'm going to do is filter my grid on converted as false, or you could just use F, and that'll filter anything out that has already been converted. So that's the only filter that I really want to run at this point. So I'm going to click the report button at the top of my grid, and we're going to see what that kind of does. So in order to get to a point where you can edit your report from a grid, what I would recommend is maybe changing the name, giving it a name. So I'm going to call this like outstanding requisition report, and then saving it at the bottom so that it will then appear in your report manager. All right, so this report has now been saved. So let's go to the report manager, find that report, and see what it looks like, and see what we could possibly do, to modify it if we need to. Okay, outstanding requisition report. So here's my report. I'm going to go ahead and generate it. I'm just going to see what it looks like based off of what what options we chose, just from our grid. So let's generate it and see what changes we can make. Okay, so one thing I noticed, just looking at it, I'm not quite sure. Okay, it looks like maybe this report is sorted by date, which is probably how we had our grid sorted. It looks like the most recent requisition is at the top. It also looks like the PO, there's a PO field that's blank. Obviously that's blank because we sorted, or we filtered our grid based off of any requisitions that were not converted yet. So maybe I could remove the PO column. Also, I've got a converted column on here, which I probably don't need because we're already filtering based off of requisitions that are not converted. So maybe I want to sort this by, in a different way, maybe by requisition number. Maybe I want to remove some columns. Maybe this report would look better, in landscape over portrait. I don't know, but we can play with those options, after we've already sent it to the report manager, and now we can edit the way the report looks. So going back to the report manager, what I can do is just click the view report details or the eyeball. And that will take us to our report creator screen, which should look a little bit familiar by now. So instead of having to choose the object or add properties, all of these were added for you when you generated the report from the grid. So some of the things I said maybe we could do, we could get rid of the PO number, we could get rid of the converted column. Maybe we wanted to reorder the report so that it's maybe the requisition number goes first, the name goes second. For some reason it says primary name. Maybe we want it to say vendor name. So we can click the extended properties and we can actually change the column title. Maybe I want to change that to vendor name and save. We can see that these are sorted by date, then sorted by requisition number. Maybe I want it to sort by requisition number instead of date. I don't know. I'm just, whatever you would want to do, whatever changes you want to make, you can now make, once that report is in the report manager. So, after making these, changes, we can go back, generate our report, and see what it looks like after making those changes. Okay, so what we've just done is basically we can now see that the this is sorted by requisition number. We did change the order. Maybe we don't like how close these the vendor number and the date fields are together. So maybe I can go to the vendor number and center that field. Maybe I want to take the vendor name and make it wider so that it's not wrapping into multiple lines. So I know that we've showed you this before. I'll just kind of go back, show you those quickly. So primary name, maybe we want to make that column width increase. Maybe we wanted to take the vendor number. Maybe I could center that to kind of get it separated from the date. There we go. Center that and save it. And we can always kind of go back and forth if you want to make these modifications just to see how they look on your report, and if there's anything else you can do. Okay, so that worked a little bit. Maybe I want to go back and make the vendor name wider, play with some other things, but just to kind of give you an idea of what you can do from generating a report from a grid, and then reviewing some of the changes we've showed you from earlier. You can also create a report, that way. Again, if you like the way this, the report looks, or if you find it useful, you want to share that with others, you can also do that from the report manager. Does anyone have any questions on creating a report from a grid?
And then just a general reminder, when you make those changes to your report manager, make sure that you save your report. Otherwise, if you don't, all of those customized changes you just made are gone.
Correct. Good point. All right, so I believe next Carrie was going to discuss some miscellaneous tips.
Okay, so I am sharing my screen again. And I guess I am logged out, so let me refresh and go into the report manager. So just a couple tips that we have not touched on today. If I go back to that, like SSDT cache summary, for example, and click the generate button and go to the query options tab, just to explain a couple of these different query parameters that you might encounter when looking at different reports. We've talked about a lot of these different filters today, but like looking at the bottom, there's an exclude accounts with 0 amounts. So you might see that on some reports, mostly like your cash summary, budget summary, appropriation summary, those summary reports. So this gives you actually 3 options. It says true, false, and it says leave blank to include all accounts. So you have 3 options. You can enter true, you can enter false, or you can leave blank. So true, if you want to only see accounts with like month to date, year to date, or fiscal year to date amounts. You don't want to see accounts if they have all zeros. False will actually show you only those accounts on the report that have all zeros, and blank will show you all. So, I mean, this actually will limit your cash summary report quite a lot, just that one filter. So if you exclude all your zeros, if you have a lot of accounts with 0 amounts. So previously my cash summary was many pages long. If I generate that now, it's going to exclude all those accounts that only had 0 amounts and let me just look at those ones with current month, year, and quarter information. So you will see that option in your query parameters on some reports. SSDT has that coded in there for you on the applicable reports. So now you see like just a short cash summary report. So that might help limit some of those pages that you're looking at sometimes when running reports. And if I go back into that cash summary report, it had also a field called total as of period. So this is another feature that SSDT has allowed for you on certain reports so that you can kind of run this report and see a snapshot of the information from a prior period. So if you leave that blank, it's going to run the report as of right now. But this database, we're a year behind in our demo database, so we're in March of last year. So let's say I wanted to see February of last year. If I'm in March and I want to see my February numbers, I can use this as of period filter for that purpose. So whatever date I enter, the system is going to generate a report as of the end of that month. So if I enter February 1st or February 28th, it's going to provide the same information. It's just as of that period, as of the end of that period, whatever date I enter. So if I generate this report now, it's actually going to differ than the cash summary report that I just generated. And so we will be able to see that change if we look at the 2 reports side by side. Once that pops up here, which I didn't do a ton of filters, so that's why my cache summary is taking a little longer. If I would have filtered down to just fewer reports, it wouldn't have as much information to pull. But up here at the top, this tells me my reporting period was February. My as of period was February. And if I look at that previous one that I just ran, the reporting period was March because my current period in my upper right corner of my screen was March. So if I scroll down, like my month to date received column in March is 12,500. If I scroll down to that bottom of the month to date received column in February, it's showing 54,000. So I mean, it's actually pulling a snapshot of those to date numbers based on the period you entered, and it's telling you at the top what that period is. So what this report, what these numbers reflect. Even though there's a run date at the top right, it's trying to give you that information at the left so you know what these numbers reflect. So you may encounter those two fields on different reports. An alternate way of obtaining report information as of a certain period would be to change your current period. So there are sometimes you may have to do that. Maybe you want to run a certain report and that as of period is not an option on the report you're trying to run. So if you wanted to do that, you would go to core posting periods. You wouldn't have to reopen a prior period. You can just change the current period. So right now my current period is designated by the green row in my grid here. So March is current. I can also see that at the top right. If I click the checkbox next to February, that's going to make the previous month current. I will see that green line change in my grid and I will see February at the top right. Then if I go back to the report manager and run that cash summary report again, and I can take this period as of date out and generate the report, it's going to generate the same information as the February, as the period as of February, because I've changed my current period, which changes my current reporting period. So those are a couple fields that we really didn't talk about, a couple different ways of using reports. This didn't reopen February, but it tells you at the top left that this was ran out of the database with the month of February being current. And here's that 54,179 that we just saw at the bottom of this report, 54,179. The report is a slightly different page length, and that's just because this one, the header, had an extra line in it, so it bumped everything down one line. But it's two different ways of getting like prior period information if you needed to. If you do change the current period, just remember to go back to current or to core posting periods and change that back, because your current period at the top right not only changes those month to date and year to date and quarter to date figures that appear on reports, it also changes the equivalent figures like directly on the accounts. If you were to go look at the accounts, the month to date expended would now reflect February. So if you change your current posting period for a report, just remember to go change that back when you're finished running that report. And again, changing the current posting period is not reopening the period. It's just changing which figures are appearing in your to date values on reports and on like accounts and on vendors, stuff like that. So those are just a couple other options that we didn't cover today that we wanted to share with you. In our advanced training, which we will schedule for you guys, we will talk about some other options. So on that cash summary report, I also saw a field called filter name. So you can actually create account filters, the same account filters that you have entered on users to limit what reports they can and cannot see. You can use those account filters, or you can create additional account filters so that you don't have to come in here and specify, different parameters. You can just enter a filter name. I want to see this report for my maintenance budget or whatever. So we will go through setting up those account filters and using the account filters and reports in our advanced training. We will talk a little bit more about this sort options tab. We will go into some of those more complicated things like that expert query in the when we were editing a template report, or if we were creating a report from scratch. We will talk about creating those report parameters. So we saw that weird terminology, the parameter that was creating these different boxes. We will show you how to create those boxes in the advanced class. We will schedule some reports. We will create report bundles, and we will use that report link that Mary talked to you about, that chain link. We will download that into a spreadsheet and show you how that can refresh a spreadsheet. So there's a lot more that you can build on top of what we saw today. But we would kind of like you to use this a little bit and get used to what you saw today, and then we'll build on that in an advanced class. So any questions about what you saw today or something that we didn't show you that you would like to see today?
Carrie, something I was going to show, and I didn't, if you could go to, it might be the budget account activity report, and then go to the sort options. You see where it shows full account code 2 times there? If you hover over each one, it tells you which one that it's looking at. That first sort is by the cash sort account code or full account code. The second one is by the expenditure account full account code. So that's why sometimes you will see on the sort options, you'll see the same label multiple times, but it's pulling from different places. And what Jake showed when he pulled the name, well, the first name, the last name were in the list multiple times, but they were under different headings. One was under the name, one was under the legal name. So that is something that you need to be aware of and be conscious of, making sure you're pulling the fields that you want from where you think you're pulling the fields. Does that make sense?
And if you try to write a report or customize a template report or try to work with a report from a grid and it's not doing exactly what you want, feel free to let us know and we can look at that further with you, because you really can do a lot with this reporting aspect of the software. And it, is basically replacing Safari for you, plus all of those classic reports that you had in Reflections. So it's really a robust tool. And if you're trying to use it and you're stuck, just send a help desk ticket or give us a call and we will look into that with you and help you get what you're looking for. So that is all we had prepared today. We will get the advanced class posted probably in a couple weeks or a month or two. If you guys are using this a lot and you're like, okay, I like what I see now, I'm ready to learn more, let us know and we'll make sure that's scheduled out there for you. And if you have any questions along the way, let us know. But thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, guys.